Hello, my name is Billy Abrams. I'm the Senior VP of Business Development at Aptar CSP, and I'm here to tell you today about our novel technology we have with respect to packaging solutions. And one could think of it as a rethinking of a way of drug product delivery and packaging, new solutions to old challenges. So the problem we're addressing is maintaining product integrity and stability against moisture and oxygen. And there are a number of things that can compromise a product. The stability of the API itself, the presence of degradants, and also physical properties that can somehow impact the efficacy of a medication, be it compaction, the dissolution rate, how the product flows through a device. All of those things can ultimately impact performance. And the solution to that is CSP's active polymer technology, which we look at as a platform technology that can support a range of different package configurations. So what do we mean? So there are various therapeutic areas and different ways into which we can introduce our active polymers to manage RH and oxygen throughout the shelf life of a product. So for instance, we can extrude our active polymer into a film that can be incorporated into a blister pack and applied onto the foil. And that's been done for a recent drug that's been commercialized and approved by the FDA for HIV prevention. We can also incorporate our active polymer into the inside wall of custom engineered bottles or containers, like we've done for many in various industries, including pharma, diagnostics, and OTC. We can also integrate the material into, like we did for blister packs, into a film configuration that can be applied onto the inside of pouches, for instance, like a packaging for a transdermal patch, or onto test strips for diagnostics. And we can also mold discrete components that can be integrated into a device, and those components can be integral to the design and can be there serving a mechanical role as well as a functional role as part of an assembly. So for instance, there are multiple programs we currently support with respect to microneedle drug delivery as well as inhalation products. Let me tell you a little bit about the active polymer itself. And basically it comes down to material science. We're adding chemistry to polymers and enabling various functions. So in its base element, the active polymer is comprised of three materials. A base polymer, like polypropylene or polyethylene, a particulate, that is the ingredient that has to do the work. So in a moisture absorbing application, the particulate is a desiccant. The third ingredient in the blend is a polymer that's immiscible with the major phase polymer. And that's very important because when we put these materials through the extrusion process, what happens is the minor phase polymer coats and distributes the particle throughout the base polymer, throughout the matrix. If you think about it, most of your structural polymers, polypropylene, polyethylene, they're hydrophobic. Well, if we're trying to absorb moisture vapor, let's say, into our polymer, we want to create a hydrophilic pathway. So what we do is we will select a hydrophilic polymer that's immiscible with the major phase. And then what happens is that hydrophilic polymer has, through polarity, a chemical attraction for the particulate, and it distributes the particulate throughout the blend. And what we create is a very unique polymer morphology. What we have is a network of interconnecting hydrophilic channels throughout the hydrophobic polymer structure. And that network of interconnected channels where the active particulate resides is what facilitates the diffusion of the target gas into the matrix so that the particle can do its job and absorb the moisture or the oxygen or whatever is the the gas that we're trying to neutralize and absorb. So what do? We create channels within the polymer to allow movement of the gases into the polymer matrix. We can identify and select and target a variety of gases, be it moisture, oxygen, volatile organic compounds, formaldehyde, odors, anything that's in a gaseous phase. If there's a culprit and if there's a chemistry to neutralize that culprit, our expertise is integrating that chemistry into a polymer such that it could take care and neutralize the culprit. So when we look at this, it's really an active packaging platform technology that enables us to incorporate multiple chemistries into a polymer and enables us then to, while maintaining the physical properties of the polymer, enables us to get the activity we need from the chemistry within. So, what you have on the left are in this chart, or in this slide rather, are the things we can do. We can manage moisture. We can manage oxygen and formaldehyde. We also have the ability to emit gases from our polymer matrix in a controlled manner over time. And on the right side of this slide, you can see where there are various formats into which we can incorporate our technology. So be it injection molded components, single shot or multi-shot, thermoform, extruded film, extruded multi-layer bottles, hot melt that can be dispensed through hot melt dispensing systems. So it's really a platform technology that enables us to integrate this unique material science into various types of formats and into different package configurations. So let's talk a little bit about the performance of these active polymers. So I think the first thing to understand is that the total capacity of what we're trying to absorb is a function of the mass of the active. And one of the things that our technology enables is it enables us to control the kinetics with which we perform that job. So for instance, in the chart on the left, we have a molded piece of desiccant plastic using 4 different formulations. All of these formulations have the same total absorption capacity, but by varying the selection of and the concentration of the channeling agent and or the selection of or the loading of the active ingredient, we can manipulate the kinetics of absorption. And that can be very advantageous for processors depending on how long the materials will be exposed in their packaging operations. So sometimes customers would like the materials to act and to scavenge gases as quickly as possible. Other times they may have a long assembly cycle where the materials remain exposed and they want to slow it down so they don't use up too much of the available capacity during a packaging or assembly operation. The chart on the left speaks to moisture absorption performance. The chart on the right speaks to what's happening with respect to oxygen. So for example, let's say you package a product into a pouch with a defined headspace, and therefore you're able to determine the exact amount of oxygen available. So let's say you have 100 milligrams of headspace, and that means you have with 20% concentration of oxygen in the air, you need us to absorb 20 milligrams of oxygen. We can give you a solution to absorb 20 milligrams of oxygen, and what we've been able to do is characterize the O2 level with respect to time if we give you a solution that absorbs 20 milligrams of oxygen, and that's what we would call a power ratio of 1:1. You need us to absorb X amount, and you can see the rate at which the oxygen will come down within the package. That said, if we want to add more total capacity, we can increase the kinetics by which the oxygen is reduced within the headspace. So with the blue line in the right chart, instead of giving a solution that is matched perfectly to the total amount of oxygen we need to scavenge, in this example, we're giving a solution that absorbs, let's say, up to 4 times the amount of oxygen. And as you can see, that enables us to have a much steeper O2 pull down rate. One of the important things to remember if you want to utilize an active packaging solution is that you really have to look at the package as a system, and you really need a tightly controlled environment. You can't desiccate the world. So you cannot have a leaky package and expect a scavenging solution to keep up with the rate of ingress or to manage the total load over time. And so really, you need to create a tightly sealed environment so you can mitigate the rate at which these gases come into the environment. And then that enables you to use an active polymer or an active packaging technology to manage the system and the gases in the headspace with respect to time. So the takeaway from this slide is to think of the package really as a total solution. And that requires the ability to have a tightly sealed package, because it really depends, the efficacy of the active polymer really depends how tight of an environment into which it's placed. So at the outset of a project, you say, geez, our product is sensitive here. Its stability can be compromised. Okay, well, what are we going to do? Let's say we have a product that's sensitive to moisture. How are we going to tackle the problem? Well, we have to do various levels of characterization to characterize the product and to characterize the package. So for instance, can the product be over dried? Is there a target water activity level for the product itself? Is there a specific RH level within the package that will lead to issues with water activity that could impact the physical integrity of the dosage form? And of course, there's the actual chemical stability of the API. I think it is important to note that we have a close working relationship with FreeThink Technologies. Some of you may be aware of FreeThink and their ASAP Prime software, which helps companies identify stability challenges with respect to time. And we've worked very closely with FreeThink to integrate our technology into their models. Let's talk a moment about moisture ingress. We talked earlier about the need to characterize a package's integrity. So what does that mean? Well, for us, it comes down to what's called moisture ingress, which at its very base level is how much moisture comes into the package over time. And there are really two pathways for moisture. There's permeation through the wall of the package, and then there's moisture ingression through the seal area. And so both are important. They're both integral to quantifying how much moisture is coming in. So now how much moisture comes in is really a function of the driving force between the internal environment and the external environment. And so typical ICH conditions, there are a range of conditions under which most companies are required to test. So for instance, zone 2 ICH conditions are 25C, 60% RH, and there's a certain amount of moisture content in the air at that condition. Likewise, it's zone 4 ICH, you're at 3065, and that has that much more moisture content, almost 50% more. And so you can use these moisture content levels to model and to predict what the moisture ingression rate over time will be given testing at a certain condition. So once you know the moisture ingression rate, for instance, let's say at 2560, you can pretty accurately predict what it will be at 3065. At CSP, we typically are testing at 30C 80% RH or 22 80% RH based on some of our major customers' requirements. But those can be modeled and can be ratioed to standard ICH conditions. So what does this mean? So if you know how much moisture comes into the package, the next piece of the puzzle is to understand, well, based on the desiccant solution we're using, what relative humidity level does that desiccant, does the active polymer want to maintain as it saturates? Because the RH will climb to a certain degree as the active polymer saturates. So for this specific desiccant plastic formulation, the active polymer formulation, you can see that it maintains a very, very low relative humidity, less than 10%, for over 70% of its effective life. And then the RH will climb over time as it saturates. So the importance of knowing this is once you know the moisture ingress rate into a package, and once you know the RH maintained is a function of the saturation level of the active polymer, that enables one to model what the RH will be with respect to time within an actual package. So here's an example of a family of bottles that we manufacture. We manufacture 54 ml, 78 ml, 112 ml, and 150 ml bottles. And based on storage at 2560 and based on the mass of desiccant and the total absorption capacity, and based on the moisture ingression rate into these containers, you can see that we'll be maintaining very low RH levels for years. And that's why our containers are so robust in terms of maintaining a low RH with respect to time. Now, often we'll be asked to solve a more challenging problem, and that's when a product may be susceptible to over drying, and we need what's called a buffered RH solution, to where there's a risk of over drying the product. Perhaps a product, whether it impacts its flow, whether it impacts its dissolution properties, or if it maybe perhaps makes something too brittle. After we characterize the product, one might conclude that, boy, we need to set an RH floor that's higher than, a nominal level of relative humidity of 1, 2, 3%. We may need to set an RH floor, let's say, at 10% RH, and an RH ceiling, let's say, at 30% RH. Well, we have multiple programs that we support, and this one is for a dry powder inhaler product where the dry powder itself does not perform as needed if the moisture content is too high, if the RH is too high, or if it's too low. And this is a chart that monitors the RH with respect to time within that package, where we are able to maintain that buffered RH. And you can see that during the use life of the product, where we get to that sawtooth part of the graph, that reflects an opening or an actuating, if you will, of the device where the RH climbs because of actuation or because of opening, and then it's able to be pulled down again once the container is reclosed. So I think that's a very telling slide to indicate the capability that the active polymers enable. Now here's an example that shows the benefit of using our active polymer bottles relative to alu-alu blisters with respect to water activity. So most people look at alu-alu blisters as the gold standard. And as you can see from this graph, if you put capsules, probiotic capsules into a blister pack, you'll see the water activity level starting around 0.12, and it climbs over time. It exceeds 0.15 and 0.20, which is a critical level for the packaging of probiotics. Meanwhile, if you put that into a CSP container that includes the active polymer, you can see the water activity actually drops with respect to time. And our friends who provided this data to us, UAS Labs, they, based on work with probiotic stability, there is a very strong correlation between water activity level and strain potency. And so the reduction in water activity really provides a benefit for these types of products. And that's evidenced on the next slide. So where you see, for instance, the probiotic stability dropping, and these are done at 2 different conditions. And of course, as you crank up the heat and humidity, it stresses the products that much more. The green and the dark red graphs, comparing to the orange and the yellow graphs, are maintaining a higher level of potency relative to an alu-alu blister. Again, alu-alu is typically considered the gold standard in packaging for things that are sensitive to moisture. And yet, as you can see from the probiotic strain stability, they can get much better counts when you compare packages that use our technology relative to an alu-alu blister. So here's an example of some predictive stability models that were provided by FreeThink. So as I mentioned previously, FreeThink is a company that does modeling of API stability using their ASAP Prime software. And what they look at degradants with respect to time stored under ICH conditions. And in these examples, they've tested regular cold form foil, they've tested a thermoform blister, and then they've tested blisters that have our material, two different formulations of active polymer included. And so in the top, again, the reference points for blister packs without our material are on the right, and the comparison units are the graphs on the left. And as you can see, the levels where we include the active polymer, we are systematically having a lower level of degradants with respect to time because of our ability to manage latent moisture and moisture that can come into the package over time. Again, this is modeling that's done by FreeThink Technologies in conjunction with our materials. When one thinks of what we call the active blister solution, I think it's helpful to think of it like a system. Like we discussed earlier, there's a known moisture ingress that you can quantify into a blister at a given test condition. And we know, based on the mass of the active polymer that's added into this construction, and in these examples, it's added onto the blister foil at the time of blister packaging. If you know how much moisture comes in over time, and if you know how much moisture you can absorb over time, and the RH maintained is a function of the saturation level, you can model how many days you will be providing RH protection. So this chart was done in conjunction with our friends at Honeywell, the makers of Aptar. And what we did is they were able to tell us, based on certain levels of thicknesses of Aptar, and based on different testing conditions, that would lead to a certain moisture ingression rate. And in this example, we've assumed that if there's a size 0 capsule being packaged into a formed blister, an Aptar formed blister, and we'd be using a cut piece size of our active polymer film that measures roughly 6.5 millimeters by 13 millimeters, and it's 1 millimeter thick. And that film would be applied onto the foil and would be residing basically underneath the capsule on the foil lid stock. And what does that mean in terms of stability protection? Well, what it does is it means that we will be providing X number of days of RH protection. So in this example, if you're using, for instance, the mid-level of Aptar Ultrex 2000, and you were putting our material into a thermoform blister that used that material, and you set that blister in a stability condition at 30C, 65% RH, it would take our material over 200 days to saturate, which means you would likely be extending the shelf life of your product by at least 220 days. So as you can see, it's very powerful based on how much the Aptar keeps out and how much we're able to absorb. We could potentially add years of shelf life to a package. This is data that was provided to us by our friends at Techniplex. And what they did is they looked at degradant levels for a product that was packaged in a cold form foil, product that was packaged in an HDPE bottle, and product that was packaged in an Aptar blister with active polymer included in the blister configuration. And as you can see, there is a dramatically lower level of degradants present in the packaging configuration that includes the active polymer. So as we start to wrap up here about the benefits of using active polymer technology, we'd like to introduce you to our Accelerate development program. And what this really does is this enables us to engage early with our customers in the very earliest aspects of the program to really help characterize the products and the packages, and to work all the way through the various stages required, from developing the packaging system to supporting clinical evaluations and stability evaluations, all the way through to pre-NDA submissions, all the way through, of course, to commercial production and post-market surveillance. So we were recognized by Pharma Manufacturing and by Medicine Maker in 2019 for bringing this type of service to the market. So it's really end-to-end support, and really with the goal of reducing risk and delivering improved time to market to getting your product stable and in a position to be launched. So in conclusion, what we discussed today was CSP's three-phase active polymer solutions. And it's all about adding value, expediting time to market, and reducing risk. Doing everything possible to enhance API stability and overall drug stability, talking about managing RH and oxygen with respect to time, being able to incorporate the active polymer into various formats to be compatible with various delivery systems. And we've successfully done this with major global companies across a wide range of commercial products. So thank you for your time. Feel free to reach out to us if there are any questions you might have. Thank you.